All right, so this video is going to be an install of a swing arm. These are the components here. This is the mounting section, the main mounting section that is the pivot point. And this is the adjustment bar that connects to it. I'll show you what that does. These are the latch components. This is a trimmer rack set up here. You'll notice on these that the connection points are at the top and the bottom. On the bed rail, the connection points are at the top and maybe midway down. So whenever you see the racks that are long like this, the 30-inch racks, these are for the swing arms. So if you ever order a ramp that has a swing arm and a bed rail system, and you have two sets of racks, and you don't know how to differentiate the difference because of the way everything's packaged, you just need to remember that the ones that are longer are for the swing arm. Especially if you have a backpack blower rack option on the swing arm. But either way, they'll always be longer than the ones that are for the bed rail. So these are the components. And then this is the arm. Most of the time, this bracket will be bolted in place when the arm is shipped. But if not, you can see how these are installed on the arm. And when I put this arm on, I'll show you the orientation of it and talk a little bit more about that. And then this cluster here is the backpack blower rack, and I'll show you how that installs as well and how to adjust it and all that stuff. So I'll get you on the tripod and then just start getting on it. So the first component to install is the main section, and that installs on the passenger side always. With this main section comes a bar that looks like this. It may be installed in place in packaging and just run all the way down, but this is an adjustment section here, so you'll just need to loosen these up and then you'll be able to adjust it. You'll need to loosen up the dovetail end bolt at the back on the passenger side. Just loosen it up. And then this section will slide in. So if the nut and the washer are in place, you just slide this in between those. And then this section goes in here, and just leave these loose. Put your bolts in place. Top. And also, if you have this ramp and then you order the arm later, you'll have to drill these holes here, and I will show you the measurements for how to measure off from here to there and what they are in a few minutes. But this is if you order it with the ramp. So these holes are here. So far this is loose, this is in place, and that nut down there is still loose. So the next thing we'll do is we'll tighten up these bolts, and then we will tighten up the bottom bolt, and then we'll crank these down, and that's the sequence. So you'll put these in and tighten them up. You'll push this all the way against that there and tighten up that bottom bolt, and then you tighten up these. right, so now you can see at least the position of the of this component here. So these springs and all of this will come already together, and then these bolts will obviously come in place here. And you shouldn't really try to close this without putting the arm on first, because you might pinch your fingers. Those springs are kind of strong. They're not super crazy, but you still might they still might grab you. So I always install the arm with it out in this configuration with the bolts facing away from the truck. So the next set is to put the arm on, and that gets installed and cranked all the way down, and then we'll install the latch, but I'll show you how that goes right now. So the arm is not really confusing. You can't really install it wrong with these in place. If you don't have these in place, it'll be interchangeable. So the easiest thing to do is hold the back, put it in place, and then turn it a little bit so you kind of lock these bolts so they can't push back. Just hold some pressure on it, and then you can start the top nut here, and then you can let go and do the bottom one. And then you want to crank those down. All right, so now what we'll do is we'll close this arm, and then we'll stand back and we'll look at how level it is across the back here before we install the latch. All right, so what you should be trying to do is trying to make sure that it's relatively level from here to there, or it's pitching up. Either way, you don't want it hanging down when it's closed. So if this side is lower than this side, you'll need to adjust that bottom bolt and either kick out the top or kick out the bottom. The other thing you can do is shim. I'm sorry if this plane is being noisy. The other thing you can do is I always send extra washers with this, and you can put a washer in between here and there to push it downward, or put it on this side to kick it upward. But you just want to try to make sure that it's relatively level. And usually what I do is I just grab a diamond sequence there on the expanded metal, and I just run it across, and then I go from there. So if this side's up a little bit higher, it's better, because when the weight is on there and you open it, it'll sag. No matter what you do, it's going to sag. But that's a good starting point where we see it right here. So this side you can kind of tell is up a little bit higher. So we'll go ahead and install the latch on that. All right, so here are the latch components. Let me put this in place real quick. So these are the latch components. It just consists of this and this plate. And I weld the nuts on this plate just to make it easier to install this whole thing, because you kind of have to adjust it a little bit. So you'll want the chain to be hanging at the bottom there. You don't flip it like this, you'll flip it like this. And if you look at the line of it there, you can see it's going out that way. That's the way you want it to go. Or just remember that the chain hole is at the bottom, and just put it on there and drop the pin in place. And then you kind of can let that thing go for a minute, and take your two bolts and your plate and get them ready, and put it on the back here. And you'll just try to line it up, and you can install it either more forward or more backwards, depending on how far it is away from the ramp on that section or this section. And then you'll just try to make it level here too. It won't be able to make it perfectly level because you have an angled ramp and expanded metal, but just you know, do the best you can, just really for aesthetic purposes. And then you can just tighten these up. Once you get it in the right diamond section here, you can go ahead and tighten them up. And that is it for that part of it. Now we can install the racks, but before we do that, we just open it and test it and make sure it swings out and doesn't go too far. Okay, so one more thing here. On this section of the ramp, like I explained, or I'm sorry, on the swing arm, I explained how to adjust these. You can shim the back here or shim this one to kick it down or kick it up. You can also use that. If it's still sagging a little bit and you don't like it, you can install that latch a little bit up. You'll still have to lift up the arm to get it in place, but once you get it there, it'll ride straight, so it'll look good. But if you get it all adjusted out, you won't really have much of a problem. This arm obviously is going to settle over time, so you'll have to keep an eye on that because there's quite a bit of weight on there. You know, that's one of the reasons why I kind of hesitated to sell this for a while, but it still seems to be popular, and I mean, I still use mine. So, but anyway, these bolts here, the top and bottom pivot bolts, have nylock nuts on them. Actually, all of these will have nylock nuts on them, but these here, you may have to loosen them up a little bit or tighten them up over time just to make sure that this pivot isn't either too loose or too tight. Because the idea behind these springs is to try to hold this arm open while your gate is down. The last thing you want to do is have to move the arm to ride up the ramp or hold the arm while you're trying to drop the gate. So those springs are meant to try to keep it out away from the ramp in a default position while the ramp is down. So you'll want to, and again, even if like maybe these are not strong enough for you, maybe you live in a spot where all the roads are super tilted, you can always just tighten these up a little bit to give it a little bit more resistance, and that should help. So all right, so I'll get this closed up. Well, actually, no, I'll install the racks now. I usually install the racks with the arm open. It's just easier to get to the back of the nuts and bolts and stuff. So I'll install the trimmer racks. We'll talk about those real quick, and then I will show the assembly and installation of the backpack blower rack. Move you back a little bit. Maybe that's a little too far. Oh, one more thing. This configuration here goes closest to the passenger side, the driver's side, and this side goes to the passenger side. So the latch section will be on the passenger side, and the hook section will be on the driver's side. These are just nuts and bolts. So we got the racks on now. So we'll close those. We'll talk about that real quick, and then we'll move to the backpack blower rack. All right. So with these here, sometimes when you install them, they'll be turned, kicked one side or the other. If you see that and it's too bad and it bothers you, you can also loosen up these here, these bolts on this mounting bracket. This piece actually, like I said, is almost always bolted to this ramp. I would weld it in place, but some people like to move these racks, and that way all you have to do is just re-drill some holes 3 inches on center, and then you can move this. Essentially, you can move the racks in or out in any direction that you want to make these easier to use and to make this hook in a desired location at the head side of the motor side of the equipment. So anyway, those two bottom bolts there, you loosen those up, and you can tilt this back and forth enough to adjust out any imperfections. But I try to set it when I build them, so there's that. And then you just want to make sure they're not sticking off the ramp too far. I square these up pretty well when I'm building them, but you just want to make sure that nothing got bent in transit or something. So that's it. And then I'll show you how I put the a piece of equipment on there or something, and then we'll move on to the backpack blower rack. All right, so you can see with this Echos stuff, I think they're all pretty standard as far as length is concerned, but just in case they're not, if this arm here doesn't fall where you want it by, in the way that I build it and where I drill the holes, you can always move those. You can move it this way, you can move it that way. Obviously you don't want to drill too many holes because you'll be compromising the strength of the arm, which is already pretty well strained. So that's the way that I install it, and this works. If you have a shorter ramp, it's actually a little easier for you to install or to put your equipment on. I'll show you what I mean now. I'm going to take this off the top, which you saw how I put it on. It was relatively easy. But sometimes what you'll have to do if you pull this away is you may have to push it past the ramp, and then you can lift it and unhook it. And that will probably be what you have to do here at the bottom. And I found sometimes with some pieces of equipment, if it's an edger, it may hit this and kind of bind. So I'll show you how I put it on.